there's a large division between the two of them. So, what a mess, isn't it? I wanted to ask you about Hezbollah because you have living in the north, you have some kind of experience dealing with Hezbollah in Lebanon, but they have targeted Kuwait. They have targeted, of course, as far as south as Beersheba and Natah in Israel. What have you seen up there, Elon, since the war started? Hezbollah has sort of joined in now in trying to
Yes.
create and disrupt more things up there.
Well, there've been. I mean, since about a week and a half ago, we got a load more stuff coming over from the Lebanon. We've had, in some cases, you know, some days we've had, 8, 9, 10 alerts. Um, Not all of them, of course, have fallen on Nahariya. Some of them are heading towards maybe Haifa or Akko or something like that. But we've had a lot. I mean, we had a lot of interceptions over the town. Some of them were quite close. One fell maybe about well, about, I mean, you can when one actually hits the town, you really feel it.
Oh
When
my.
when an interception misses and one hits the town, one did hit in the north end of the town only a day or two ago. I don't think it killed anybody, but it made a right mess. Set someone's house on fire. You know, I had a video of it somewhere, but I wish I'd have sent it in to you now. Um, but these are these are much smaller missiles. They're not the big ones that the Iranians send. But if you're not, if they hit your house and you're not in your safe room, you've got a good chance of being seriously injured or killed, especially if it's an older house where the walls aren't so thick. One of the ones that was built maybe in the 1950s or 60s, the walls are very thin because they were cheap. They were flung up to put immigrants in, and there's a lot. There's still quite a lot of those in Nahria, but yeah, it's not funny really. Actually, I mean, it, it, I mean, we get a little blasé sometimes. 'Cause you think, oh, not again. Should I bother going into
Yeah.
and you think, so this is the like third or fourth time today. Or just when you're going to bed, you just lying down, and then you get this little thing that comes up on your phone as well, because you get a pre-alert now, because the system's got much better since even last year.
Wow.
A pre-alert comes up on your phone. Your phone makes this. There's a broadcast system, an emergency broadcast system that works. You can opt into it on your phone,
Is
and
it you got
it'll
about
tell
10
you.
minutes, Elon, to get into a shelter? Is that still the
It
protocol?
it depends where the missile is coming from. With the
Okay.
Iranian ones, you had several minutes because the radar, of course, it had a lot farther to go. So the radar on the other side of the country, or whatever, or the interception system, or the detection system, would pick it up a long time before it hit. But with the ones from the Lebanon, um, usually it'll say that you'll hear an alert in a very short time. You head to your safe room, and the time between that broadcast and hearing the siren go is much smaller. And after the siren goes, it's maybe less than 20 seconds before you'll hear something, either an interception or a loud bang if it does, which is loud enough as it is, or it'll be a bigger bang if it hits the town.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, it's amazing how technology has changed so much and better
Yes.
notifications. I was going to go to Jay. Jay, real quick before we move on, because we got to finish a couple of things. I did want to ask you about what's going on here in the States, because they just recently had Tulsi Gabbard before Congress explaining the situation, what's going on, intelligence. Obviously, she's DNI, and what the projection is that Iranian regime is unlikely to change even though the RGC has been pretty much decimated, leadership has been completely decapitated, just about. They remain pretty skeptical that the regime will change, meaning that even though they've been denigrated, it's been degraded, I should say, and the Iranian regime is still intact, meaning the RGC continues to have power. Is this much to do about nothing, or should we pay attention to these reports because Israel is saying the same thing? The Israeli reports are saying it's unlikely that you would have a regime change.
I mean, when you have a route like the Iranian mullahs, it takes work to pull a root out of just the soil, and you think about the years of indoctrination of the police state, of people disappearing and suddenly showing up publicly hanged. You look at the atrocities that this regime has done. They rule by fear, and fear is still a very powerful incentive to stay in power. In fact, fear, according to Machiavelli, fear is more powerful than love when it comes to power.
Ah, yes. You've
You're
been reading The
absolutely
Prince,
right.
haven't you? Mm.
One of the things that they're concerned about Russian technology being shared with Iran. They're concerned about drone technology being shared with Iran. You've seen some of these drone footage that were definitely with the help of Russia. These drones were able to hit multiple sites. Uh, they're concerned about Russia jumping into this. Jade, are you concerned about that as well?
No, I don't. I don't think Russia will join in, because I think they're still kind of occupied with their own conflicts, and even if they weren't already occupied with that, I think Russia does not want to fight a war on two fronts. Now,
Mm,
what they're doing now is exactly what Joe Biden was doing with Ukraine. They're get money, resources, weapons, whatever you need to fight the enemy of my enemy. So it's an asymmetrical proxy war of now in reverse, that Russia is playing using Iran to fight Western allies, and we know that also Russia is an antagonist to Israel as well.
incredible. I know it's one of those things where I think the U.S. is trying to do something, and I'm going to turn this over to you because you got the next topic. Is CIA, MI6, British intelligence? They're trying to within the country destabilize it to the degree that the regime can fall, and part of that deals with the Kurds. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna present this now. It originally was in a language I don't know, so I had to use AI to translate it. So don't yell and scream. But here we go.
It is quite clear that we, owing to its historical name and importance, consistently emphasize the significance of the Kurdistan National Army. This is without any intention on our part, or indeed without us viewing this matter as merely a partisan achievement. Our expectation is not that this joint army will be formed in the very first step, bringing an immediate end to all our challenges. Therefore, we can certainly take the initial step towards this goal, which could involve establishing a joint operations room or a dedicated center for it. Undoubtedly, an army of this kind would certainly possess its own distinctive uniform and its very own unique logo. A special announcement specifically concerning its own matters will become an integral part of its operational activities. With the earnest hope that the crucial steps of the armed forces of Eastern Kurdistan, specifically encompassing the Kurdistan National Army, can be initiated and fully implemented at the earliest possible moment.
Wow.
So what does this mean specifically for us? Well, the Kurds have not had their own country. They've always been a minority with many different borders, whether we're talking about, I believe it's Eastern Turkey, parts of Syria, Iraq,
To Syria.
Iran.
Yeah, Iran.
All of these countries have a minority Kurd, and the Kurds are very, very disliked. And the reason goes all the way back to the Kurds at one time were the ruling class of the Islamic world. Some of the most impressive fighters and leaders came out of the Kurdish, the Kurds. So there's always been apprehension in the Muslim world of a Kurdish state. But now we have something very similar that is happening today. Like you mentioned, the CIA, MI6, they're not only giving weapons to the Kurdish minority, but they're training them, and it's very
Yeah.
akin to what happened in Afghanistan in the 1980s when they used I believe it was I forgot the name of the ethnic tribe, but they used a Kurdish tribe, I think, there to fight against the Soviets.
Mm.
And this is exactly what I think they're going to try to do with Iran. You're going to have well armed, not Iranian, but they'd be Kurds that are going to probably act as boots on the ground, possibly, maybe for special operations. And what that will
Yeah.
happen, what is eventually will happen, I believe, is you're going to see a wider conflict, whether that is Iraq, maybe even Turkey not liking the idea of armed Kurds, which could
Ooh.
further destabilize the region. Um, so, how would Iran respond if a Kurdish armed group begins formal coordination across their border? I think their focus would be on that army and annihilating, and then you have to take into consideration what would the Iranian army do against the Kurdish population in their country at that point. They,
Yeah, there's about five sects of Kurdish people. They're Kurdish, but they have different areas, and there's about five of them within Iran. And so you got these coming from the west, this Kurdish army, to liberate their brothers and sisters. I mean that's the trying to leverage a already tension between Iranians, at least RAGC, and the Kurdish people, try to leverage that tension by bringing more Kurdish army into Iran and liberate them. And I think what they wanted to do, Jim, I'm not sure, this is an older report, is create buffer zones. So you sort of create buffer zone, sort of break up Iran, at least Western Iran, into buffer zones where people can actually go and protest without having the threat of the
uh,
IRGC coming and killing you.
yeah.
That was at least the goal. I'm sure it's changing, and it's rapidly changing and evolving as they go because they see some of the weakness. As long as the U.S. and Israel continues to decimate the RGC um, leadership and infrastructure, then it's a lot easier for the Kurdish army to come in. But I just hope, Jay, that they don't betray the Kurds again. They've been betrayed by every president.
Every president, and I mean every president, and then a lot of countries betray the Kurds.
Yeah,
They start off as friends, and they eventually turn against them because they fear them.
right,
And some of the most pro-Western people have always been Kurds, as far as in the Islamic world.
right. And they're great fighters, by the way. They are very tenacious in terms of how they approach military, how they approach war. They're very tenacious, great fighters, and that's why I think the MI6 and CIA has always gone to them. But I just, you know, Kurdish people have suffered so much, and that's what they've risen up, and they have this army now, and to protect them because Syria, the Muslims in Syria, of course, ISIS, of course, Turkey, and
Uh,
Iran, the Shia militia, have always gone against them
yeah.
and
Famously, yeah,
exterminated.
Iraq. We betrayed the Kurds there.
Hmm. Yeah, it's one after another. So, question to you, Jay, is, do you think any success can come out of this? I mean, it is a good way to leverage some kind of instability to the RIGC, but do you think it'll be successful, barring a betrayal of the American government again?
It depends on how it's leveraged and how it's used. It really would have to give them not only the arms, but you would have to have a sustained air campaign to make sure that no one could retaliate against them.
Mm,
Um, it also begs the question: um, how much movement are we going to see as far as Kurds leaving these other countries where they're minorities and going to form a real stabilized region
yeah.
that can.
Well, I mean, will they ever get a state? I mean, Israel, the Kurds, they're very similar in terms of that. Like they wanted a state. They've been wanting a state, and
Forever.
obviously God's plan
Yeah.
was Israel to become a state. Do you think Kurds will get a state at some point?
Uh, I hope so. it would be nice to actually have. Um, I mean, I'm sure that someone would say that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are friends of the West, and I'm not going to debate that. But I think given a lot of the support that the Kurds and their view on Westerners, they seem to like Western allies a lot more than
Yeah.
perhaps some of the Saudis do.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, and thank you for that, Jay, because that's something that we need to keep an eye on in the Kurdish army, and in terms of what they will do and how they will leverage that in terms of Israel and the U.S., how they will leverage that to destabilize the RGC. But I wanted to ask you and Davey and Elon, of course, anyone can answer. What are the three likely scenarios that you're going to see for Iran? Is it going to be a regime change completely when you have maybe Reza Pahlavi coming back or some kind of government like that? That's one. Two is you're going to have a weaker IRGC that will be repackaged and rebranded, sort of what happened with the Soviet Union, and they became Russia, which is basically the KGB wrapped up in a new cellophane, that kind of thing. Or are you going to have no regime change and the RIGC and the Ayatollahs will continue and they'll remain in power? And in a couple of years, you just be dealing with a nuclear Iran again and have to go through the same thing. So, what are the most likely scenarios in your thoughts? And anyone can answer one at a time.
I think option C, that the regime remains in place and gets a chance to build a
Mm,
nuclear weapon, is off the table. I think. I don't think that our government here would want that at all. We can't afford it because for us the basically for Israel, the idea of the Iranian regime ever getting a nuclear weapon, it's completely existential, because they only have to get one of those through. I mean, though our anti-missile system is very good, it's not hermetic, as one IDF spokesman put it. We don't stop absolutely everything, and it only takes one nuclear missile to get through, and Israel is so tiny that it would devastate the entire country. So that one is, option C is unacceptable to Israel, absolutely. And in fact, actually, when you think about it, um, if Iran decided to fire such a thing, if it ever got such a thing, and he fired it at any of the Gulf states, um, so this is completely unacceptable. I don't think they will allow the regime to stay in its present form. It's either got to be so reduced that it can't do anything, and be quietly eliminated in the years that follow, or it's got to be a complete regime change. I don't think there's any
mm,
other acceptable option now.
yeah. What do you think, Jay?
I personally believe the fact that Reza Pahlavi has been so upfront and vocal for Israel, I think Israel would love to see uh, a return of the peacock throne. And if I'm going to speculate just from, uh, I'd say that is a kind of a shoo-in. Maybe he's already claiming to be the interim leader of the government. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I have a feeling that you could possibly have a split Iran where you have
Mm,
like a hostile Iran that is a kind of a pariah North Korea state, and you have
mm,
a more moderate state of Iran that they break up, which
mm,
might be easier to do than trying to take all of it, because I think there
mm.
are places that the regime is just so entrenched. There's no way.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, not as a means of a pushback, but just your thoughts on this. Reza Pahlavi, of course, represents the old kingdom, the Persian king, going back to the Peacock Throne of Cyrus, and obviously his father, his predecessor. Um, they were rough on minority groups. And Iran, of course, is made up of more than just Persians. There's Kurds, there's different kinds of minority groups that are there, and Azerbaijanians, they're there. Do you think that hurts the Reza Pahlavi coming in and representing that old kingdom with all the repression that they had? Or does he have to just sort of rebrand and say, like, look, it was what it was, but we're not trying to do that. We're not trying to exert Persian rule over the minority groups.
If he's a politician worth his salt, he will rebrand. He will rebrand. He'll come from the idea of I am an Iranian refugee. I've been a minority all my life. I've lived as a minority inside of the United States, and now I am coming back. So
Very good.
I think he could use his lived life as a means to saying, of course I care about the minorities. I understand their plight, and don't judge me. But it's the famous thing that I've heard a pastor say: "Don't judge us by what other Christians have done to you. Judge us by what I do to you." If he could somehow take that tact, he might be able to erase some of the wrongdoings of the old regime.
Very
But
good.
then
Davey, what do
again,
you think? Yeah, go ahead.
I was about to say that then we have to also talk about what happens after he's gone. No, there are no heirs after him, as far as I know.
No, he doesn't. That's a good point. Davey, what do you think?
Well, of the three options that you mentioned, I would probably tend to think it'll go the way of the second option. Only because I've got Daniel 10 in the back of my mind. I also think of what happened with Gaza, and they're setting up the board of peace there in Gaza, and Hamas is still an entity.
Yeah.
So I don't think the IRGC will be completely done away with. I think it may be, what do you call it? Put in a weakened state, basically have no political power, but I don't think it'll be completely eliminated because, but yeah, look, I guess time will tell, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of, it's hard when you get into the speculation, but yeah, whatever the case, look, I don't think the regime will be as radical. I really do think this will achieve certain goals, but it may only be for the short term because, we know what Daniel 10 says. We know there's still going to be trouble later.
Yeah, it seems
I
to me
would.
that Iran will have
Sorry,
some
can.
kind of power and control, but we don't know to what extent, whether it's like a repackaged Soviet Union or they're just going to remain in control. But you're absolutely right, Davey. That is something that needs to be at the forefront of any consideration as Daniel 10.
There's a difference, though, between the Iranian situation and that in Gaza. In Gaza, you had at least 80% of the population who are in favor of Hamas. So, where the Iranian regime is largely hated. The Iranian people hate the regime. They can't stand it. So this is I think, but I mean I'm speculating here, but I suspect once they bomb the living daylights out of the IRGC facilities and done their best to cripple it, I think what would probably happen after that is we start supplying the Iranian population who are rising up against that with munitions so they can finish the job on the ground, because I don't think you'll find we want to put Israeli soldiers into that situation, and I don't think the US wants to put US Marines in there either. But if supplying weapons and arms for people to finish the job that we've started, I think would be the next step, really.
Yeah,
And of course, you've got the Kurds as well. Maybe they want to,
there is
so
that
that's what
factor.
I think would happen. And that's what, if I was in government and I was, either in the US or Israel, this is the kind of thing probably I'd be looking at, because we don't want to get involved directly on the ground because we don't want any more casualties out there. We've got enough on our plate already. So what you do is you feed munitions in there
Elon for
to finish off the
Congress.
job. Yeah, well, let's face it, you're going to lose a few Congress members, aren't you? Anyway, Omar's going to go, isn't she? Nobody wants her, do they? And that other clown, what's she called, Rashida Tlaib or whatever. Please
Yeah.
God, they get rid of them, deport them. strip them of their assets and get rid of them. You know, send them
Well,
home with the money that they came with.
they have a lot of assets now, surprisingly. How they got,
Yeah.
out of a congresswoman's job, they are millionaires now. Jay, before we finish, obviously for all of us, but I'm going to direct it to you, Jay. Just your thoughts on how much conspiracy theories have developed from this war. I mean, you're talking about Bibi's dead and AI went crazy over the last few weeks, over this past week. Trump is being dragged in by Israel. This is Israel's war. He's just doing the bit of Israel, and on and on. I mean, you have things like Erica Kirk was scheduling an Epstein, calling girls for Epstein at 16 years old, and she's involved with the Mossad. You have Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel. Charlie Kirk is still alive. I mean, you have the Real Housewives of Podcastistan, I guess that's what they call it. Feel like Piers Morgan and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, who are absolutely going berserk on conspiracy theories. And then you have the memes that have come out. It's like a meme war out there. I mean, I think it's great to see all these memes, but I've never seen a war, now that I'm, 50 years old, never seen a war that has so much of this conspiracy theories, so much misinformation that is available for people to believe. And of course, the great memes that have come out of this. So what do you think?
I think we've built a giant legacy myth about Iran. It has been a problem state since 1980. Consider that.
Yeah.
Since 1980, we've had a buildup of all of this anticipation to what will happen when finally the West confronts this intolerant religious state that oppresses its people and frankly oppresses just the movement of technology and society. I think what you're seeing now is a decompression. People have to feed into it because they have been waiting for this to happen. And now that it has happened, they have to make a narrative of why it's happening. That's why you see the meme war. That's why you have a billion different conspiracies, how Israel has been the architect of this for years. No, the truth is the U.S. propping them up and paying them billions of dollars, and now a different party is actually in that doesn't want to continue to appease them, and is confronting them, and it's definitely not on Israel's behalf. Again, that is a very shallow way to look. Does the U.S. do Israel's bidding? No. Does the U.S. want to bludgeon their rivals by taking out one of their allies? Yes.
Yeah. How come nobody talks about how evil the Iranian regime really is and how many thousands of people they killed, including Americans? They killed a lot of Americans for 47 years. And yet it's almost like, forget that. They're a kind, gentler society. We're the oppressors. I know what Dave Smith said. Dave Smith from the Libertarian Party. He's head of the Libertarian Party. He was going to run for president, but because of, I guess, because he has security issues and family issues, he didn't run. And they elected some crazy person. But the Libertarian movement, it is absolutely gone insane with this, with the war. Now he's saying, the reason why they're so brutal is because we are so brutal that we kill their kids.
Yes.
That's why they're fighting.
Now, I mean, if you go onto YouTube, this is one of the bad things about YouTube. You have a million video bloggers that have gone to Iran basically to give this idealized, oh, look how modern and how tolerant and how everybody is just, it's a peaceful place. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos of people basically showing how great it is to travel to Iran. But that's well produced propaganda. It's and it sells is even sadder. It gets hits, it gets clicks, because everything that regular people talk about in Iran, it's the truth is, if you step out of line, if you are part of the LGBTQ, you're gone, you're done. And these are the things they don't, it's all right that they're intolerant because they're over there, but this is the thing. If we say anything similar, man, we'd have a crowd of people ready to lynch us. But when it comes time for people that oppress their women, that you look at pictures of women in bikinis in the 60s and the 70s in Iran, and then you look at today, it's shocking. Women are being beaten and killed because they won't wear their head coverings. This has been going on for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
No problem.
It's interesting, Jay. It's interesting, Jay, that we even have people in our chats, and we love them. You know, we love our enemies, and we love people that criticize them, criticize us, and for whatever reason, they just feel like they have to. But they would criticize us more for the attack on Tucker Carlson, but they would never, ever, ever criticize Islam or Iran or what they've done to the Christians in Iran. Or what they've subjugated women, subjugated Christians, putting them in prison. This has gone on for a long time. So I just wonder why the blinders on one side and total foment and hate on the other side, and that's conspiracy theories at I guess you could say at the very forefront of this, because people believe it. People believe it.
It's called
Davey. Go ahead.
Itching ears.
Yeah. Well, you know, when it comes to war, you know, a lot of people sort of think of, you know, the physical stuff, you know, they think of, that's what a lot of people think of when it comes to warfare. But just remember, there's always been an information warfare. Whenever there's war, there's always an information warfare. Jay mentioned before propaganda. It's kind of like, in our day and age, look, there's always been fifth column movements. There's always been propaganda agents. But in our day of social media, you know, with the net and with the erosion of patriotism, you know, this kind of stuff spreads like wildfire. I recently watched a movie called The Man Who Never Was. I think that was the title of it. It was an old movie from the 50s. It was based on a true story that happened during World War II. But it shows you the power of information, misinformation, and that kind of thing. We're seeing it on steroids today. Now, the likes of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and all the rest of it, you know, it's kind of like they're the new fifth column movement, basically. They're there to undermine Christian values, even though, look, they promote themselves as Christian. They're there basically to undermine the, the political conservative group, to cause division there and cause division amongst believers, you know, where Christian Zionist or Zionism is basically seen as the enemy. Now, I might be jumping the gun here, but it's kind of like, if you look at Tucker Carlson, he went over to Russia, I think it was 2024, and, you know, everybody remembers the interview he did with Putin, but one thing a lot of people forget is the interview he did with Alexander Dugin. Now, you want to talk about Russian collusion. I believe Tucker went over there. He may have been invited. I don't know if he went of his own accord or if he was invited over there, but for him to interview Alexander Dugin, and he seems to have picked up Alexander Dugin's philosophy now. And now he's back in the West, in the US, and he's spreading this. You know, he was seen as conservative and, you know, far right in America. You know, Alexander Dugin's considered far right in Russia, but he's Marxist to the core. And not only that, he's a disciple of Satanist Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, so, and we'll get to that in a moment, Davey. You brought it up. Yeah, we're going to get to that. We have a whole section on Dugin and the influence that he has on so-called conservatives. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So look, my advice to everyone is check everything you hear, everything you see, whether it be on any social media platform, whether it be the news, because there is so much misinformation out there, and there's never been so much talk about wanting to control the narrative nowadays. So there is an information war, and I think a lot of people forget that. There's a battle for the hearts and souls of minds, and the information war can be just as devastating and cause as many deaths as actually the physical war. And we're seeing this with the spread of the propaganda at the moment. We're seeing a ramp up of attacks on within our soils.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's happening more and more. And I just, I don't have any issues with the memes. I think they're funny. I don't make fun of war or anything like that, but I just think how far people go to make these memes go. And I guess it's even the White House gets into the memes too. So some people love it, some people hate it, but it is what it is at this time. Jay, I'm going to go to you. This is a topic that you wanted to bring up. Trump has said that he wants to open up the Strait of Hormuz, get other nations involved. One of those nations is Japan, South Korea, but especially Japan. And they seem to have agreed to some degree to respond to the Islamic attack in the Middle East. And Sanae Takehashi, which is the Prime Minister of Japan, seems pretty much in favor of what Trump wants to do in the Middle East. But recently, there's been some ringings in Japan regarding what to do with Islam and some of the pushback there. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's very interesting what's going on. First of all, about a year ago, we talked about how one of the fastest growing religions in Japan, which is for the most part an atheistic society, nearly doubled the amount of mosques in 10 years in Japan. So very up and coming, not necessarily because of converts, but because of immigration. And this has caused numerous conflicts. We have a video that we're about to share of Mizuho Umemura, who's part of the legislation group, the Parliament of Japan. And she, I'll let her speak for herself. We translated this into English for you viewers. So let me just pull that up. Give me one moment.
Ms. Mizuho. Ms. Mizuho Umemura.
I'm not asking whether you're aware of it or not. You see, even though their majesties the Emperor Emeritus and Empress Emerita showed such deep concern for our people and our nation during their reign, why must we simply yield to such forceful demands? I'm sure there are Japanese citizens who, if possible, would also wish to return to the earth, to Japanese soil, and prefer a burial. However, because we value harmony and prioritize public health, isn't it the reality that we choose cremation instead? We must clearly state that our country is one where you should do as the locals do when in Rome. Now, of course, I'm well aware that there are many Muslims residing here legally, working hard, and contributing to our nation as members of Japanese society. However, their values, culture, and sense of justice naturally differ from the general sensibilities of us Japanese people. That's exactly why, when welcoming them into our society, we must consider both the positive and negative impacts and clearly draw a line between what's okay and what's not. I want to emphasize that if the political side doesn't handle this properly, local governments will suffer. I believe we must learn from what's currently happening in the West regarding the issues between Muslim communities and existing societies. As I mentioned earlier, I want people to recognize that if they end their lives in Japan, they must either choose cremation or arrange for international repatriation to their home country at their own significant expense. I believe we, as Diet members and the political leadership, need to demonstrate our stance through legislation. I didn't give prior notice for this question, but could I have one final word from the minister?
Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare, Takemi.
Yes. Well, speaking from the position of overseeing the law, as I've been saying, this is categorized as a local administrative matter. Therefore, I believe each local government should consider it while taking their specific regional circumstances into account.
Ms. Mizuho Umemura.
We don't need any more burial grounds than we already have.
Wow.
Pretty bold woman there.
Yeah.
As Japan has always been a place of cremation. It's always been you might have a gravestone marker, but Japan has such small amount of land. It's always been a give and take. A lot of graves are sometimes taken away, and new projects eventually come up. Now, with Islam growing in Japan as it has been, they've been asking for the ability to build more cemeteries for them to be in Japan. Now, we know exactly what happens when there are Muslim cemeteries. I could give you the Balkans, Bosnia and Kosovo, wherever mosques, burial sites, or WASP land were established across the regions, those caused an idea of territorial sensitivity and identity, and they always wanted to claim the land in continuity. This is Islamic land, and that always has caused real big problems. I guess the easiest one example I would give you is we know that in Jerusalem, not only did the Sultan wall up the Eastern Gate, but he put an Islamic graveyard all throughout the valley so that if the Messiah ever did return, he couldn't step over the graves of unbelievers. So it's always been used as a way to plant a flag down and say, this is our land. And I think Japan is aware of this. In fact, one of the quotes I would bring from Miss Umemura is that she already understands the conflict of the Western countries with Islam. I think Japan is very, very aware, being somewhat xenophobic. I hate to say it that way, but yes. They can see what's happening in Germany, in France, in the UK, and they realize with their birth rate, which is really bad, that this would only devastate the sense of Japanese cohesion. Japanese love unity. They love unity of purpose, unity of thought, and unity of spirituality. And Islam, it doesn't happen. There's very little proof that Muslims do not eventually conflict with their neighbors. In fact, it's kind of biblical. His hand will be against all of his brothers, and all of his brothers' hands will be against him. I can't think of any single biblical prophecy that is more apparent to believers who read the word of that specific prophecy about Ishmael's children. And they can't even get along with each other. So Japan is joining the bulwark against anti-Islam expansion into the Far East, which this couldn't be a better time, because they're actually, you know what's funny is they're in agreement in some ways, not all the ways. I'm not going as far as to say they're going to do exactly what China did, but China is very suspicious of Uyghur advancement in their society. They know that cultural cohesion goes down once Islam comes in.
It always does.
Yeah,
it always does.
It always does. And now with Trump bringing in the Japanese, keep in mind this is the first time that we're going to see Japan bringing in war vessels into a place that's thousands of miles away from home territory, into a conflict zone.
Is this going to bring, and Jay, just your own thoughts, it's just going to bring some kind of what people say, now it's a world war, because now you're implicating other countries that have nothing to do with this, except for Japan largely depends on oil coming in from that area. It's to their best interest, but now it's going to implicate South Korea, Japan, of course, the U.S. allies. Now it's a world war.
I think we've been in the staging part of a world war for a very, very long time. I think it's been a Cold War for a very, very long time.
You know, there have been some people, and I think I agree with them, that have called the Cold War World War III. And this is just a continuation of that, or they just call it World War IV, if you want to put it in those perspectives. But, you know, I love the Japanese prime minister. I think she's great. Seemingly, I mean, God knows, these politicians, they do one thing great and then they do something crazy the next day. But at least for Japan, it's been stabilized. And for what they went through, you know, with the execution of the prime minister, and Abe, and now seemingly the threat of not seemingly the CCP threat all over them. They have to take a stand, and now they see the issue with Islam, which is aligned with China, at least Iran is. They see that as a big threat. So I guess, Jay, for you, being Jewish and Japanese, and you've had your cultural enrichment with Islam and how much they don't like, Japanese and Jews. So
yeah, I mean,
guess
that's right. In Israel, I I got yelled at by some Islamic taxi drivers, and I got cheated for money by some Islamic shop owners. It's a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
I highly suggest it.
And
Israel.
actually, you're being very nice, but actually, you were death threats. I mean, let's
Oh, yes.
put it. Let's put it.
I was.
It's
I'll
we
find
even had to
you.
get the idea.
Jerusalem is a very small city. Trust me, I'll find you. Were the exact words he said to me, because I didn't want to
you
pay
even had
him.
to get the exorbitant amount of money for
ridiculous
whatever
amount of money.
Oh, yeah, we even had to get an IDF soldier involved to sort of just make sure that we're going to be okay.
His mediation was kind of lackluster.
Well, what do I think he was from Wisconsin or something like that. He was an American guy, but he traveled there and he didn't just seem a problem. But, I'm glad he was there and I'm glad he was armed and I'm glad nothing else happened. Praise the Lord for that.
Amen.
I did want to bring this up and maybe we'll kind of collaborate together and kind of bring our last issue probably here, or our last topic is what's going on with the right. And what I mean that is conservative / extreme right. There's been a term that has been kind of put together, and it's called the woke right. I don't even know what that means. It was invented by this guy Lindsay, and I think it was just used to muddle the waters in terms of who's conservative and who's not. But definitely things have changed within the conservative movement and even among Christians, unfortunately. And it's something that Davey alluded to, is the influence of Satanism and occulticism through a man named Alexander Dugin. We talked about Alexander Dugin a couple of weeks ago with Jacob when we were talking about Eurasia and the multipolar world and how he was devastated that Iran was getting pummeled at the beginning by the Israelis and the U.S. because they said, well, it's still a only polar world. As the U.S. still dominates, it can take down a country and its religion. And of course, he's anti-U.S., so don't mistake me. He's not some good guy. But now we know, and I think we have the article. If you can, guys, post it on the chat, please. I send it to you guys. Alexander Dugin and Luciferianism and his advocacy and his promotion and his discipleship from Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley is mentioned very much in that passage, in that article that you'll see there. And so if you want to grab it from the chat, that'd be great. You can see it there. And this is a eyewitness of one of the conferences. Now, Alexander Dugin has been very much a promoter of Russia, promoter of this idea of Eurasia, that Russia has to dominate now instead of the U.S. And he is, unfortunately, going in a way that it's not good. He is promoting people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, and say, oh, these guys are great. You got to listen to them. And, of course, General Flynn, which are pretty much bigwigs within the movement in some way, because even Catholic priest, Carlos Vigano, I think he was excommunicated by the Catholic Church because his stance against the Vatican, not in a good way. Just because they're against the Vatican doesn't mean they're pro-Christians. But at least the fact that there's a globalist movement within the Vatican, that's always been. And he is a mentor to General Flynn. He's mentored General Flynn. So they got these Catholic conferences coming up, and they have been, including Joe Kent, promoted by Alexander Dugin. Yeah. No doubt. I mean, there is some really, really spider webs here that we can connect the dots, that people are being manipulated. We'll start with Andy here real quick. Andy, Alexander Dugin, definitely no good. He's connecting all the dots, at least for us, that Luciferianism and occulticism is a big part of this, and there are people buying into it, including Joe Kent, which recently came out against Trump, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, including there was that what was that girl's name that was she was like Miss Universe at some point. She was
Oh, you mean
Carrie
Carrie
Regime?
Pre-Jean Boller,
Bowler,
whatever her
yeah.
name was.
Now she's coming against Marco Rubio, saying he's not a Catholic because he's a Christian Zionist. So their ire and hatred is definitely geared toward
Yeah.
those who disagree, especially Christians. Call them Christian Zionists. They call them dispensationalists. All kinds of things. Uh, Andy, we'll start with you. Is the wool being pulled over people's eyes spiritually with this movement going on in the American conservative Christian little c right?
Absolutely, definitely. And it because it the thing is with this movement is like with every good and convincing lie has to have some element of truth in it, and and this movement and think that and what you see with Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and this other crazy woman, it feeds into you know we're living in a time when the very foundations of societies have been undermined by the left, and also are being attacked, of course, by the incursion of Islamic mass immigration and invasion into the West, and people are looking for yeah, people are looking for strong voices and looking for society to be restored. So anything things that appear to have those main traits. It's like the whole idea of I mean, the most sane people want society to reflect godly-ish kind of values, but behind, so to some extent, the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens, with their Christ is King kind of this kind of thing coming out, it appears on the surface to have something that appeals to people who are frightened and maybe even a bit desperate and unsure. But underneath it all, there is something very, very dark. And of course, this is where the connection of Dugin and his Lucifer is basically his Satan worship
Yes.
comes in, and it's hiding underneath it all is a horrible anti-Semitism, just for a start, a deep hatred of biblical Christianity, which of course, because all this stuff is coming along with a good helping of Roman Catholicism, which in itself is a syncretistic faith, and not so they have a hatred of biblical Christianity, a hatred of Jews, and also a hatred of Israel comes with it. And this movement is designed to split the right. It's designed to fragment it, and it's also designed to delegitimize evangelical Christians as well. You can hear what they're saying, that there's a subtext with it all as well, of all of these things, even though it appears on the surface to be pro-America or whatever. It's not really. Underneath it all, it's bringing something very dark with it.
Yeah, your thoughts, Jay, on it?
I would just, it comes as no surprise considering even in the Orthodox camp, which Russia is the Russian Orthodox Church, I found they have such bad replacement theology when it comes to the church in Israel that it naturally breeds this animosity towards any idea of a restored Israel. And so in that stew is where Dugin comes from. So not only is it a Catholic thing, I mean, and to be honest, it's a Catholic thing in the sense that not mainline Catholicism, but a very specific branch of Catholicism. You know, when we talk about Catholics, it's not like one monolithic religion. There are many camps within the Catholic religion. Some probably are not so hostile to Israel, but many are. It's because of their theology of the replacement of the church in favor of now they are the children of Abraham, not any Jew.
Hmm. Davey, go back to you. You started talking about Dugan and stuff like that, and we're going to pick it up here. And this is bleeding into and overlapping into the Christian society. Christians that would normally agree on a lot of things, including eschatology and end times, now seem to be so fractured because they've taken political alliances, conspiracy theories, and all kinds of different ideas and brought it into their faith and mixed it all up that now it's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah. Well, if I were the enemy and I wanted to undermine the West, I would want to infiltrate. And I really think that's what's happening here. It's kind of like, I find it interesting. You mentioned, what was the guy's name there before? His name escapes me that you mentioned, who's in the Catholic camp.
General Flynn?
Kent? Kent?
Joe Kent.
Joe Kent. Okay. It's interesting. You got Joe Kent. He's kind of like the plant in the Catholic camp. You got Tucker Carlson, and you got Candace Owen, of course, in the Catholic camp too. You've also got Tucker Carlson, who's in the Protestant camp, and his friendship with people like Douglas Wilson, and they're having a big influence over those who are already leaning towards replacement theology and all the rest of it. So there's this infiltration. I think Tucker, he struck up his friendship with Dugan when they were there because they both saw themselves as, having the same values. They were both considered themselves far right, even though their definitions were both far right. I think even Carlson considered Dugan Christian, but, on face value. But it's kind of like, this is where the definition of Christian kind of differs from what we would consider Christian. So this is, I really do find this more concerning than actually the the war that's actually going on there, because this is done
behind you, darling.
Yeah, this is done by stealth. A lot of people are buying into this. I know. Look, it's even affecting a lot of our viewers. They'll see a post on X or, on social media, and this is where everyone's got to be. We've all got to be so careful with what we see and hear out there, because there is the media has become such a sewer of lies, misinformation, and deception. People need to begin with the word. People need to know what the word says about Israel, what the word says about Christ, who he is, what he's done for us, and what he expects of us. Nowadays, it's kind of like we've moved so far away from the word of God that people are easily open to deception, and they'll buy into all this stuff, which they are. It is really sad and disheartening to see, and it's kind of like, you'll know them by their fruit. You'll know them by their fruit, and we're seeing the fruit of a lot of those who are buying into this, and it's actually really kind of leaving an incredibly bad taste, in a person's mouth, just the way Christians wouldn't. I probably do think this is probably the most important issue out there at the moment. My prayer is that people will look at this closely, examine everything thoroughly, dig into the Word of God, and find out what the Word says, and don't just listen to, your favorite Bible teachers or anything like that. The church is in such a disarray, and this is going to further split it. I really do think this is an attempt to undermine basically the current US administration for sure. You know, this is going to split the right. You were absolutely right, Elon. It's going to further split the body of Christ. And I keep thinking of something Jacob said years and years and years ago, a quote of his where he said there were going to be three issues that were going to cause division in the last days. One being, the believer's stance on Israel, believing in God's prophetic purpose, plans and purposes for Israel. The second being the timing of the rapture, and the third being the whole LGBT kind of stuff. And what Jacob said is actually coming to pass, but I have never seen such anti-Semitism within the body of Christ in my whole life as I have seen in the last 3 weeks. It's just kind of like exploded. So we need to know what the Bible says. We need to keep everyone in prayer. Those who are buying into this, we need to wisely share the truth with them when and where possible. And we're to do it in a spirit of gentleness, because at the moment they're acting really quite hostile and aggressive and not in a spirit of Christ-likeness at all. And I think that's showing the fruit of what they're believing. But this is very concerning. It is very concerning.
Yeah, no doubt, Davey, that we hit a moment in church history that it seems, everything's unstable, especially in America, but in other places too. The war and rumors of war, we got apostasy, and we got infiltration of people that normally wouldn't go this way. But man, you see the amount of the powerfulness of media and conspiracy theories and informations and lies and deception, unlike anything before. I'm going to go back to Andy. Andy, real quick, is this the case where doctrine and eschatology matter, where you see people that have an understanding of Israel and the prophetic plan, that they understand God's purpose for the church and for Israel, more and more supporting the Jewish people, when you see people that have at least an unstable view, let alone a radical anti...
Yes, you can, darling.
A post-millennial or kingdom now or a millennial view, we're now being turned over to an anti-Semitic view. Not all of them. I'm not broad brushing everybody, but seemingly quite a bit of that of those in that camp are turning anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you there, Marco. Yeah, I think that is the case. I mean, eschatology is not a secondary issue. All doctrine is important, I think, and because sooner or later, if you've got something really, really wrong, it will have consequences down the line. And we've often talked about the whole pre-trib thing, about that will have consequences for people, possibly eternal consequences in the 70th week of Daniel when the persecution starts. But even before then, embracing false doctrines like amillennialism, postmillennialism, and think can have destructive effects, of course. And once you embrace one falsehood, it can leave you open to another. Because everything is connected to some extent. So you can see that people that embrace a supersessionist view, that they don't. I'm not saying they automatically become anti-Semitic, but it does automatically predispose you, I think, to accepting something where you start despising Jewish people and despising Israel, and it opens you up to that very error that Paul talked of in Romans 11. Boasting against the branches that were cut off.
Yes.
And
yes.
I really think it can have very serious consequences. You can see some of the hate actually coming out. Against dispensationalists, for example, that's coming out of the amillennial camp. Some of it is really, really vicious.
Yeah,
And
they're
of
literally
course,
blaming them for the war. Like this
yes,
is
of course, Tucker
Christian
Carlson is
Zionism.
one of those that does this as well. I mean, he's particular. I mean, I have no problem in labeling him as a vicious anti-Semite, and he particularly also saves a lot of his venom for dispensationalists, and and of course Christian Zionists. He hates our guts.
Yeah, and you see like Candace Owens attacking Calvary Chapel because of their
Yeah.
view of Israel and their biblical stance on supporting the Jewish people and the dispensationalism that a lot of them espouse. She went after them on a national
Yes.
syndicated show saying, as a whole, Calvary Chapels.
Yes. Yes. So, um, those evangelicals who embrace, a love for Israel and the biblical view of Israel will become, I think will become unpopular if
Yeah.
the views of people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Pre-Gene, whatever her name is, if those kind of views take a hold, really,
And you could see, Andy, how the enemy is so shrewd, right? He uses people in so many
yeah,
ways. That he first lifts these people up to notoriety and fame and having some kind of points that may be valid. And then once they get that popularity and they become established, household names in the conservative movement, then they flip, then they change and introduce now this poison into
yes,
a movement that they have been accepted. Like Tucker Carlson was very much accepted by a lot of Christians. A lot of Christians watch him. A lot of Christians agree with them. I even agree with them on some of the things that happened earlier on. Like in the 2020s and 2021s and
yes,
2022. I was like, he's saying the right things, and then it flipped. And
yeah,
there was always some kind of weirdness with Tucker because of his past, but he had been on CNN. He was kind of liberal, but anyway, yeah,
yes.
that's what's going on. I
I,
want to finish the episode.
Oh,
Oh, you got a point.
one thing too, it's kind of like I know uh, they're kind of using the anti-war thing too, it's kind of like so you are kind of here sort of seeing thing. Oh, Trump's led us into war. He promised not to do that kind of thing. All going along with this, and so that they Tucker and likes they're being painted as the ones who want peace and the more peaceful ones and all the rest of it. But don't think that Alexander Dugin was a peaceful guy. With the
Yeah,
Ukraine war going on, he was going, kill, kill. He was calling for. He's a warmonger. Alexander
yeah,
Dugin is a warmonger and a Satanist. So
yes,
they're just putting on a face that they want.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, this is just a absolute cover up of what they want to do. I want to show this last subject here, and yeah, it's got it right here. And I want to
oh,
talk about Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich, the depopulation guy. He died at 93 this
oh, there,
week.
Bev.
One of the most
Oh,
evil men in history. One of the most evil men in history is Paul Ehrlich, and he's dead. And you can see here some of the articles that were written about him. But he wrote this book, Population Bomb, back in 1968. He was wrong about everything, guys, and he never apologized for the lives of his prophecies that
mm,
he wrecked. He predicted millions of people will die of starvation as a result of overpopulation and unlimited resources. Like we don't have unlimited resources. India, the Middle East is going to die. Millions of people are going to die in Asia. And this idea has had disastrous consequences for the West and for Asia.
mm,
I mean, he's the one that led in his prophecies led to obviously the World Economic Forum. And by the way, Paul Ehrlich never admitted he was wrong, even after the 60s and 70s came and went and nothing happened.
mm,
People did starve, and which was basically the centerpiece of his prophecies that it was going to collapse the world. And guess who picked it up? This is the left's obsession with depopulation. It's at the center of their program. You have like
mm,
the World Economic Forum, which is huge on it. Klaus Schwab talks about it all the time, or like Dennis Meadows. I don't have time to watch it to play the video, but he talks about what was it, Andy? Decimation of almost 7 billion people. I mean, he wants to take it down to like
Oh,
a billion people or less.
yes, yes. He quite calmly talked about reducing the world's population by about 79% or something.
Oh,
Absolutely, absolute nutcase. These people
yeah.
are genocidal. They're absolutely crazy, evil.
This guy is definitely from the devil, and perhaps no book, and this is no exaggeration, no post World War II book has had such dramatic, disastrous influence on policy. Like it went even beyond just people's views. It went into policy. It went into like USAID, because what they promoted was this idea that because there's population, a huge population, and there's got to be millions starving because of planetary limited resources, then they started promoting abortion. They started promoting money being transported to Africa and
Yeah.
Asia for abortion, for sterilization. And the first sentence of the book is obviously interesting. It says, "The battle to feed all of humanity is over." That's how the book starts. The battle to feed all of humanity is over. And and so the idea of like USA, the idea of this book, The Limits to Growth, the idea of Klaus Schwab, all have to do with the fact that they want to depopulate the world. No joke. This is no exaggeration. I mean, the insert in the book, it says, I think it's on the back. Sorry, it's on the back of the book. It reads like, while you were reading these words, 4 people will die of starvation, and yet 24 more babies will have been born. So he definitely had a thing against babies being born, because he kind of put this absurd quote that while you were reading, four
Yeah.
people died and 24 people were born, 24 babies were born. And so he wanted to use the West power and influence. And by the way, the book rocketed to like the bestseller, and even penetrated popular shows and music, in terms of triggering a number of urgent ideas in the West, including the false premise that in order to give women a proper place in society, well, they needed to have abortions. And this was promoted by the Club of Rome after the book was
Mm.
printed, right? And I think there was another book called The Predicament of Mankind. I think that was the Club of Rome uh, promoted this idea. And guess what? That's 1968, that's 1970, 1973, abortion. 1973, abortion in the United States. Uh, Davey, when did abortion become legal in Australia? I don't know the year of that, but I would imagine it happened at some point in the 80s or 90s. I don't remember when.
Oh,
I looked up the data one time, but I don't remember where the Western countries began to adopt abortion. But anyway, the 1971 was Klaus Schwab, by the way. The World Economic Forum was founded in 1971. So they always had these, and now you listen to their videos, and it's such a bizarre world where their central mission is to depopulate the world. It's just unbelievable. And we need to, the Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum says we need to reduce the population. I think it was Dennis Meadows. Yeah, Andy, he talked about reducing the population by almost
Yeah.
80%, and the co-author of that book, a climate apocalypse book. I think I had it up here. Yeah, Limit Growth. It is unbelievable how much he has influenced out of one book, and false prophecies, by the way, they
Mm.
never came to pass. The 60s came, the 70s came, then 80s came, the 90s came and went, and none of it, what he said, happened, except for now you have Roe v. Wade entrenched in American society, women going to work and not wanting to get married or have children. That is the view that began in the 70s, and there were popular shows that promoted the idea of women not staying home, not taking care of the kids, but having a career, over, not saying that it's wrong, but over having a family, that having a family would actually destroy your potential and things like that. And while that was happening, I think it was Henry Kissinger, another wonderful humanitarian, all in joke, that he came up with his perspective, and it's called NSSM 200, where he talked about the overpopulation, and it was part of the hysteria. And even Nixon called in for a global version of Roe v. Wade sent out to the whole world through Planned Parenthood. So we're not talking about some innocent guy here. We're talking about a real, real evil man. And then what you have later is it repackaged. It was repackaged into climate change now. A society, you remember Al Gore, The Inconvenient Truth? It was repackaged, and the nations panicked, and everyone went along with it. Population started cutting back, and books and films started coming out about the climate change hysteria, which is still with us today. I mean, if there's one thing that I think every politician, left wing at least, and even right wing talks about, is we have to take care of the climate. We have climate change. Then it was the one China policy in the 80s, one child policy in the 80s. That destroyed China forever. It destroyed Asia forever. It destroyed Japan. Jay, you can comment.
I mean, one thing this is not going to make me very popular, but I'm going to just say it anyway. The same camp that keeps pushing dates on the rapture, you know, when they get it wrong, they reset the date. That's exactly what Dr. Ehrlich does, okay? And the left, for that matter. Oh, well, a few more years. This was a warning for some time in the future. Not specifics. It'll happen. It's just going to take a little bit more time. It's the same thing. They keep resetting the date until they become a prophet. That's not how prophecy or even good speculation works.
Yeah.
They literally, the end of the world is nigh because you're having a kid. What kind of nonsense is that?
I did find out, Marco. I just looked it up. I knew we had abortion in the 70s, but it was actually earlier. South Australia was the first state to have any form of legalized abortion, and that was 1969. But you're right. He absolutely hated the idea of anyone having kids. I never read his book, but I did see the movie. I think it was called Zero Population Growth, that came out in the early 70s. I remember seeing that in the mid 70s on a camping trip, believe it or not. One thing I do remember for that, and this is interesting, the governments of the world got together and they decided that no one was allowed to have a baby for 30 years. And if you did have a baby, you know, it was illegal to have a baby. So you were basically killed, and you were put in basically a suffocation machine, if I remember the film right.
Wow. You know, it's not it's not coincidence, right? That the book came out in 68, and then Australia had abortion legalized in 1969. I mean, a lot of things came out from this book, like no fault divorce came after that because people didn't want to stay together and have children anymore, and it denigrated women. Because if you were a housewife, that was not a good thing, right? That's how people looked at it. And it's still to this day, motherhood was revered at one time, and it's been denigrated everywhere now. And the message, the cultural message is, abortion equals sexual liberation. That is the message that young girls hear today. Abortion is sexual liberation. And as one of the worst presidents the U.S. ever had, Obama, when he talked about if his daughters got pregnant, what will they, what will happen? He says, I don't want my daughters to be punished with a baby.
Punishment.
Like if there was a big
punishment.
Fault. Yeah, punishment.
Not a blessing.
Not a blessing, which God calls it. Right?
Yeah, not a maturity thing, but a punishment. Yeah, like it's a prison sentence to have a kid. Just wicked, evil man Obama is.
Yeah. And the whole message, guys, that you should delay marriage as much as possible. You shouldn't get married. You should delay it until you're in your 50s and 60s and, by choice. And, wait until you do this, wait until you do that, wait until you live your life and establish a career, own a home, this and that. People have swallowed this idea that you have to be ready in order to have a baby and things like that. as if the most important thing are those things rather than a person coming into your life and passing on your faith and establishing that, a genealogy in which the Lord said from the beginning, be fruitful and multiply. That's the first command that the Lord gave. And now it's being dwindled to nothing. I'll show you this last one and we'll be done. This is U.S. fertility. If I were to show a European one or a
Japan
Asian
one.
one, like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, Japan is like in a death spiral. And I don't remember the exact figures, Jay, but in 30 years, how many less Japanese are going to be in the world by 2050, I think it is?
I'd say quite probably a third, if not a fourth.
Yeah, it's right now. I think the population of Japan is 120 million. Correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but and I think it's going to be under 100 million at some point in the next 30 years. That is incredible, rapid decline. And so now it's less and less. You see more women that are in their 50s and 60s that are childless
Yeah.
and by choice, right? Not because they had some kind of physical problem or anything like that, just by choice. And that number is going to continue to dwindle in terms of less and less children and more childless women. So that was the goal, by the way. That was the
So,
goal back in the 60s and 70s.
so Marco, to go over the numbers, 124 million people in Japan, approximately. Nearly 30% of the population is over 65. So in 30 years, if they
Wow.
can't reach 95, you're going to have
30%.
yeah, you're going to have 36 million less Japanese. It'll be under 100 million in Japan
Oh, you
in
know,
30 years. So
none of the,
within my
yeah,
lifetime.
yeah.
I actually think that'll increase exponentially too, especially when you've got people marrying their AI and stuff like that now. And that's going to rise. So I think that'll kind of, as you see more of that happening too, this is only going to increase more or decrease more.
So,
1.2 birth rate in Japan currently.
1.2, and you need to be at least two to
Two.
break even. It's
Two to break
1.2.
even.
Oh. And in Europe is the same. The UK is the same, 1.4, 1.6, I think it was continental Europe. I guess the only ones that are not listening to that is the Muslim world.
Yeah.
Muslim world, it's like 8 to 10 kids. I forget what is it in England, Elon? Is it eight average?
Oh, goodness me. I'm not entirely sure.
Because they're all on the dole, right? They're all on the dole.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's certainly high. I think the average is above 5 or 6. I think, and yes, you're right. And you can have a Muslim man, and he might have multiple wives.
that's right.
2.5 to
And the
3.5 according to what I found just now. 2.5 to 3.5, but these are 2024 study, and it's overall British reproduction is 1.4 per woman. The
Oh
estimates
man.
for Muslims in the UK is 2.5 to 3.5. It varies per study, though.
Yeah.
Yes,
I guess the other ones would have been Orthodox Jews, right, Elon?
yeah. On the whole, yes, they tend to have larger families, but particularly so here in Israel.
Yeah.
And yeah, the ultra Orthodox birth rate is and the religious birth rate is out has outstripped the Muslim birth rate here.
Wow. That
Yeah,
is, yeah. So that
I
seems to be
mean,
the only populations. And Africa, by the way, I think it's one country in Africa. I don't want to say Zambia, oh, Tanzania, I forget which one it is. I think it's the highest birth rate in the world. So, the influence of the Christian faith in Africa has, at least in some countries, did not, I'm sorry, prevented Ehrlich's in
yeah,
USAID to go in there and abort their kids. And even when Hillary Clinton wanted to send aid to Nigeria and Kenya, and they said, well, you have to adopt LGBT and abortion, and they said, keep your millions. We don't want them. At the loss of
yeah,
so much infrastructure and millions of dollars, they wanted to keep their kids. So God blessed them. And but man, it has really ravaged the West. it has really ravaged the West for sure. So I'm going to finish there and we can go backstage. If you have questions for Andy, for Jay, for Davey, for myself, please send them in if not already. And we'll see you guys in just a few minutes.
Okay, welcome back. And we have your questions here. We've got quite a few to get through. If you have asked a question and you've addressed it to Jacob, we're keeping them for once Jacob's back. So there's quite a growing list for Jacob. But first question for today. Is that real going around on social media that Benjamin Netanyahu, quoting from one of his highly admired writers, saying that Jesus Christ has no power over evil in the world? Is that AI? What are your thoughts on this clip?
Okay, well, I've seen some of this, but he is being horribly misquoted and misrepresented. What the I think it was something like the bit that's being quoted out of context is, and I quote, Jesus Christ has no advantage over Genghis Khan because if you are strong enough, ruthless enough, powerful enough, evil will overcome good. Now, this is all, this is the quote out of context. So, it's been mentioned actually a few times. I mean, I think David Wood, the apologist, Acts 17 apologetics, has replied to this a number of times, and he's saying that Netanyahu is not denigrating Jesus at all here, but he says he used Jesus as an example of someone who is supremely good, and as Genghis Khan is an example of someone who's supremely evil. But Netanyahu was trying to point out that if good people do not stand up to evil tyrants will win. That moral clarity and moral goodness on its own is insufficient unless it's backed up by action. So really, the people that are misquoting him is incredibly dishonest. And Netanyahu was actually quoting a Catholic scholar called Will Durant, who was an American historian, and I think one of the things that Durant said was that nature and history do not agree with our conceptions of good and bad. They define good as that which survives and bad as that which goes under, and the universe has no prejudice in favor of Christ as against Genghis Khan. So that's the quote. That's what Netanyahu was referring to. And it's really, he was just saying that it's like I think was it Bonhoeffer said that evil prospers when good men do nothing. And this is so there's nothing really. It's Benjamin Netanyahu is not saying these things out of some kind of anti-Christian prejudice at all. Israel's very favourable towards Christians on the whole. I mean, it's the only place in the Middle East where the Christian faith is growing. So, so that's really all there really, I think, needs to be said about that.
Yeah, I've heard the text and I was like, this is out of context because the way the people
Yes.
were putting it were just a snippet, and I'm like, I don't think he meant that way. Not that I'm,
Yes.
just trying to defend him at all costs. There was more to it than that. So I appreciated Andy that
Yes.
you clarified.
I think some of the people that are exploiting this and misrepresenting are from the Candice Tucker pre-Gene Bowler kind of axis as well. They're jumping on this bandwagon to beat Netanyahu with that stick, but it's all twisting it all.
Can we call them cabal or syndicate rather than access?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to make sure.
Yeah, no.
Axis. Yeah.
Thank you all for that because, look, it was doing the rounds on social media big time yesterday. Okay, next question. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 22, what is the meaning of, if you call a man a fool, you will be in danger of hellfire? Now, I can read the whole verse if you like. It says, but I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell.
Yes. Well, this is one of the things with this is the English word fool, which, it's a very mild word, really, compared with what the what the word meant in Greek. I mean, when we think of fool in English, we think of someone who's often, someone who can be mentally deficient, stupid, or a bit of a muppet, really. But the Greek word behind, or in fact, actually, the Aramaic word behind the Greek as well was much stronger. Because I think, if I remember right, the same quote, there were a number of different things there. I think there were two different things you could call somebody. One was raka, which means someone who's an empty person, and the other one, I can't remember exactly what the word is now. But the final word, the one that's translated fool, it really is a word that what's it? It's someone who is, what's the word? Almost worthless, and completely evil and corrupted. It has a moral side to it as well, and saying that to somebody, you're almost like. It's almost you're like dehumanizing them in a sense, and it's very strong. It's much stronger than the English word means. Really, there's not an exact equivalent for that with one word in English. So it's something you would say that is very, very strong, that you would say against somebody, and to say that without cause. There are people out there in the world that we know that are like that, but you wouldn't say that just to somebody randomly or without very good cause. We know politicians that are like that are completely despicable and wicked in the way that they behave, but but that's a slightly, that is a justifiable thing. But just to say it to somebody on the spur of the moment is not the same thing. That's my take on it. Some of it anyway. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
No, I mean, I just it means serious verbal dishonorment for sure. So the connotation is like you say, Elon, and I think a lot of people use the fool to justify. Well, you can't say anything bad about anybody. That's
yes.
That they take that verse to basically justify. How dare you use such language? That's very unchristian of you to call someone that. I think no, it really means something a little bit more pronounced than fool. Like if I say you're being foolish, I could say that in a way as stop doing that. That's foolish. It's a warning. While as calling the person worthless, empty-headed, which is kind of the original meaning, it has a much deeper connotation. You're below me. You're beneath me. I shouldn't even have to have anything to do with you, is a closer approximation.
And of course, you've got Jesus also referring to some people as fools.
Correct.
But obviously in the context he's using that, he's that's the justifiable sense of it. But I think the Matthew 5 thing was much more about using it in an improper context.
Oh, thank you guys. Okay, this one's for Jay. Jay, where in the Bible do you find most of your musical inspiration comes from?
I mean, if I'm being honest, it's everywhere. Genesis, I have two songs. One's about Israel, obviously. Another one's about Hagar, Elroy. I have a couple songs about I have one song about the Book of Ruth, one song about Isaiah, and of course one about the parables of Jesus, 99 for 1. So there's no one place that I go. The Bible is really like this first album, which are all the songs I've written, it's all over the Bible that I've taken parts of these from. The Psalms are a huge influence on a lot of my music, because some of the phrases in what I sing, or well, what I usually sing in my songs, they come from the Psalms.
Praise the Lord.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Okay. It seems like we're living in a Romans chapter 1 world. Do you think God has given us, the United States, over to our sins?
Well, I'll start this one. Romans 1 does speak about the fact that when God gives people, a society over, you will see certain things. And that starts with idolatry and not thanking God. Obviously, I would put the first one. Not thanking the Lord, not acting righteous, not acting moral, and committing lawlessness. That's the first part where Romans 1 talks about that they did not give him thanks, and they acted immorally, and they acted against God and against other people. And that's a spiral down, because as you keep reading, that you get things like idolatry, you get things not giving glory to God and giving other things glory, which you could see in our nation that has happened. But you keep going down and spiraling down, and you're going to get immorality to the point where unrestrained immorality, it would be the next event. It will be sexual liberation to the point that now it is aberrant sexual practices like homosexuality, men with men, women with women, committing what is indecent, what is wrong, and vacating the natural use of sexuality, the natural affection that a man would have with a woman in marriage and having children with her. Now it's going to be complete debauchery in terms of the confusion of sexuality, even to the point where now you have things like AI or animals and pedophilia. It becomes completely destructive in society. So moral debauchery, moral confusion, sexuality, homosexuality, and then you get to the end where it says, and those who advocate for them, those who commit hearty approval to what they do. And so, yes, I believe the wrath of God in that sense, not the eschatological wrath of God, but the wrath of God upon a society is already present in America. Now, is it completely given over? I guess I don't know, and I don't think it's fully given over. I think, yes, parts of our society has, but there's still a remnant. There's still salt and light, not as much as I would like to see, that is still having that effect on society. And there's many young people that I have met, and even the last 5 to 10 years, especially the post-COVID world, a lot of young people are open to the reality of the gospel of Christ, and we've seen that. I pray that things like Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church or radical right-wing crazy nationalist movement don't take the place of biblical Christianity in the kids' hearts. But we've seen young people turn to the Lord. So there is a bit of a reprieve in some capacity. We've seen a lot of the LGBTQ kind of movement stopped. Moving forward, now they turn more like against Israel and against I guess you could say against the war, and then the pro-Islam, rather than just kind of parading around in their advocating for their right. So I do think that it'll continue, but at some point, and this is probably related to the eschatology that we're talking about, at some point all the societies will be given over to that degree. But the U.S. definitely is one of the leading societies that is heading that way. I don't think it's happened fully yet, but you could see already. So once you see those things in a society, certainly the wrath of God is there. Certainly he's turned certain people over, but maybe not the whole society.
Instead of Romans 1, I'd actually point to Judges 19, the concubine. They weren't going for the concubine. They were going for the guest, the man. The people in that, they wanted the men to be brought out so they could do what the Sodomites wanted to do to Lot and the people that Lot was hosting. And I think that's a better analogy, because you look, after the consequences of the concubine and her being sent to all the tribes were horrified at what they did. And they came against Benjamin because of that. And I think you're going to see the further breakdown in America to the point where people are going to be horrified how bad it gets because they keep pushing the envelope. It started out with we come out of the closet, but now it's pushing to the point we want access to your children.
Yeah.
Eventually,
like
there will come a point.
Yeah, it's like gang warfare, and now it's not even much about LGBTQ. I would say that it's transsexualism now.
Yeah.
That it's promoted. It's the trans movement that's taken over. Even homosexuals complain about it. What about us? I think there was an article written a couple of years ago. So what happened to all the lesbians? Because there's less emphasis on lesbianism and homosexuality as it was in the 80s. Now it's all about trans and gender identity, and it literally. They feel this is the homosexuals. They feel they were hijacked into a movement now that is a lot more radical. And you see the drugs and the what do we call them, the trans drugs, the drugs for sexual changes that occur, and it's causing a lot of suicide, causing a lot of hatred, psychosis, and many of these shooters have been trans shooters.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you go to that lifestyle, you for the rest of your life, you will have to be on some kind of pharmaceutical drug.
Well, thank you for your answers there. Okay, interesting question. Where did the conspiracy theory that the current state of Israel is a Rothschild creation come from? This is very crazy. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So the ideas have root in the 19th century anti-Semitism, where you had pogroms and things like that in Europe and of course in Russia. And eventually it moved to Europe, and that specific linking to the Rothschild, to Israel's founding, became prominent in the 20th century. So it began just linking up Rothschild with the Jews at some point. And then in the 20th century, it became more like they connected Israel to the Rothschild. And that idea, oh my goodness, is proliferated in recent decades. So the broader scope it goes like this. It originated in the mid-19th century. The first major traces, I think it was in 1846. It was popular by a man named George Derenville, I think it was. He was a French guy. And basically, he didn't like the Rothschild because they supported the war between France and England. And it was about falsely claiming that the Rothschilds profited massively, especially Nathan Rothschild, profited massively from the Waterloo outcome, the Battle of Waterloo. So this was fabricated completely, and it widely was spread around Europe, establishing this idea that the Rothschilds were sort of like a symbol to Jewish financial manipulation and secret influence and the war and all this stuff that you hear today. That was back then. So the specific thing that they were pinning on Rothschild now regarding Israel's creation, it draws, actually, this is the crazy thing, it actually draws from historical facts. But just like many things, historical facts are twisted and exaggerated and distorted. So this is what happened. So some of the Rothschild family, including like Baron Edmund James and things like that in the late 19th century, he was a philanthropist. He supported a lot of things in terms of you would call today humanitarian work. And he supported literally the early Zionist settlements in what they call Palestine back then, is Israel, funding like agricultural colonies like Rishon, I think it was called Rishon LeZion. And
Rishon LeZion, yeah.
Yeah, and Zikaron Yaakov. And these were just basically Jewish immigrants that were going into the land and planting. And he was a philanthropist. And he says, well, these people are going to starve unless we do something about it. And so he began to help them and develop the land for agricultural reasons. It wasn't a scheme to create a state. Nobody even talked about the state at that point. It was just simply Jewish immigrants who were going to starve in swampland because largely the Turks had destroyed that land. And it was just a basic way to get agriculture back in that land. Now, fast forward to the Balfour Declaration. It was Britain's pledge to support a national home for the Jewish people in the land. And guess what? It was addressed to Lionel Walter Rothschild, which is I think it was the second Baron Rothschild. And he was a prominent British Zionist leader. right? He wanted it. He wanted it to happen, and it was sent to him symbolically, although he wasn't involved too much, but he just supported it. And he was a representative symbolically of the Jews and the Zionist movement. Like people like Chaim Weizmann really appreciated the work that they had done in helping the Zionist movement. So this theory is widely regarded by historians as completely baseless, rooted in anti-Semitism going back to Europe in the 1800s. So Israel's establishment in 1948 actually resulted from, number one, God's plan. It was, you got to think, God overall plan in the eschatology of the day. But it was also rooted on Zionist movements. God used the Zionist movement grassroots in order to create this fervor to bring Jews, a lot of them very poor, a lot of them from the pogroms in Europe, to Israel to plant and be farmers. There was a nation of farmers. The second thing that, or the third thing, was the impact of the Holocaust on global opinion. People, for the first time, had compassion on global Jewry to come back and have a land because they had been decimated. 6, 7 million Jews had been killed in World War II, specifically in the Holocaust. Third or fourthly was the British mandate. The British mandate in politics. The British had controlled that area after World War One. They started partitioning it, and the UN came in 1948. And after the war, they began to partition all that land. And one of those things that got allowed, and this is again the hand of God, was the fact that Russia voted for a socialist communist state to be in the Middle East. They couldn't care less. They didn't like Jews anyway. But because the Jews that went into the land were primarily farmers who had come from socialist countries, they felt that it was important, the Soviet Union, to have a communist socialist state. The US voted for it, Truman voted for it, and that's how the state became in 1948 after the war. So while the Rothschild individually contributed philanthropically, you would say, and like many supporters of Zionism, there is no evidence at all whatsoever that they have some kind of mastermind control of the state. That idea, unfortunately, persists today largely through internet, memes, videos, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and literally they cherry pick fabricated connections after blending, old ideas with current events. That's really all it is. Hopefully that helps. And you could see how Tucker Carlson, Elon, this week took, what was that, British Nazi Mosley?
Oswald Mosley, yeah.
Oswald Mosley made him into a hero, that Churchill was against him and he imprisoned. Well, not even understanding who Mosley was and what he did and what Churchill did to him was to keep, Nazis away from England, but he didn't even imprison him that long, considering, his crimes and considering his hatred toward toward the British society. So anyway, hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Thank you, Marco. Excellent answer. And there's been some thank yous in the chat for answering that too.
Praise the Lord.
Okay, the next question is dealing with Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 5 and 6.
That's Andy's favorite chapter, by the way.
Yes, I know. His favorite chapter of all time.
Praise
awesome.
God.
Let me just go there. I'll just get the,
yeah.
let's have a look.
It may be a good thing this was carried over from the last couple of weeks then. So, waiting for Andy.
5 through what?
5 to 6, where it basically says, Persia, Ethiopia, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer with all its troop, Beth Togarmah from the remote parts of the north with all its troop, many peoples with you. And the question is, please explain why the Bible teaches that Iran opposes Israel in the last days, considering over 1 million Iranians and counting are denouncing Islam.
Right. I think there's a certain presupposition here, which is behind this, and that presupposition is, obviously, is that this occurs before the Lord returns. However, Ezekiel, I mean, look, this is my opinion on this. Of course, I'm just giving my opinion. But this is, of course, the Gog and Magog war. But really, the how you view this, whether you think of this as Islamic, is if you are thinking that this occurs before the Lord returns. I would say that Revelation, the book of Revelation, tells us explicitly when Gog and Magog attack Jerusalem, and that is after the end of the millennium. So I would not see this as having anything to do with Islam or whatever. I would see this as happening at the very end of the millennium, when Satan is released to deceive the nations once more. So that's the way I would look at this. Because if you look through all of this, you see there's certain things that come out here. One is that after Gog and Magog, Gog and Magog are destroyed, it says the Lord's name will never be profaned ever again. Well, the fact is, if this happens, just one thing, if this happens before the Lord returns, or before the 70th week of Daniel, as some people claim, then the 70th week of Daniel, particularly the abomination of desolation, has the most, it's when the Lord's name will be blasphemed like never before in history. So there's a problem with putting this just on that one thing alone before the Lord returns. I think this is, that's the way I would see this anyway. There are other reasons why I would, see this as being after the millennium, but that's just one of them.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to comment? No? Cool. Also, I will just sort of say too, have a listen to, I think it's on Moriel TV YouTube, part 2 of the Islamic Antichrist. Jacob will talk about that in the last half hour of that teaching, and actually I was really blessed when I first heard it too. It kind of got me to look at things a little bit different too. So thank you for that, Andy. I really appreciate your answer there. Okay, just a couple of more questions. Okay, what is going on with this Pope? Is he deluded by his own status? He reminds me of the cardinal that helped Hitler.
Oh.
Yeah. How dare you? Sorry. Channeling my inner Greta.
You're in the Greta, yeah.
I know that normally within the papacy and the Vatican, they're very anti-Israel and very deluded in their own status, but I'm not sure. Is he talking about overall, or did he just recently do something pretty gnarly?
Oh, I think this was from a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think what he was doing back then. I know he's done a couple of things in the last week or so, but I can't remember. Take my mind that far back.
Yeah, I mean, if he is acting in an anti-Semitic way, like overly, yeah, it would remind me of those who helped Hitler during World War II. I'm just not sure what he did. I guess I will need more information, but traditionally, yes, they are like that. They are very much, popes have this anti-Semitic biases, and unfortunately, it has shown over the centuries, and more or less in a grievous way. Sometimes not as much, sometimes not overt, but definitely in the 1940s, the Pope that was serving, I think he was called Hitler's Pope. Some people try to defend him, saying he was just trying to save people, but I think there's enough evidence to say that he definitely acted on behalf of Nazism, and of course, Italy was pretty much in line with fascism at the time with Mussolini. So, if there's more information, I would love to know. But yes, traditionally, popes are like that.
I think we got the question around about the time when the war, in Iran first started, and I think he made the state basically calling for peace, and he was also seen pretty supportive of the Iranian regime in his
Oh,
comments to
yeah.
memory.
Well, from what I remember in the 1970s when they had the Vatican II meeting in obviously they published it, Vatican II, they were very, very idealistically close to Islam. They were favorable of Islam. And there are some Catholics, even some Catholic priests, who see a lot of connections with Islam. Islam does the same thing too, because Islam talks about in the Quran about Mary, the mother of Jesus. They see the Catholics sort of in a bizarre way adoring her. They see Fatima, which was basically the daughter of Muhammad, and there is a Fatima apparition within the Catholic Church of Mary. They see a lot of connections to that. The popes since then have been very close in line with this idea of Islam, and they have been promoted the idea of Chrislam. They have promoted, it wasn't just Rick Warren, but it was also supported by the Vatican. And you could see that they hardly ever criticize the Muslim attacks on Christians. Sometimes they do, very rarely do they, but most of the time they whitewash it. And even when the Pope goes to the Middle East, which he's visited, even Francis, the late Pope, they are very hush hush about what's going on within the massacre of Christians in Africa or in the Middle East. They don't mention it, but they do mention the fact that the Jews are warmongers. They attack Muslims. They are an impediment to peace. So they've always taken this stance, especially the last, I would say, three or four popes. One, two, three, four. Yeah, that's four popes that they've taken this stance of pro-Islam, more or less generous to Islam, and very anti-Israel, very much against the state of Israel.
Thank you. Okay, two more questions today. Okay. Isn't Zionism and the idea of supporting Israel to obtain a blessing founded in Cyrus Schofield's study Bible?
No.
Yeah, yes.
No.
Yeah,
It's founded in the
I would
Bible.
agree. Exactly. I would go going straight to Genesis 12. Yep.
I mean, you can go all throughout the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New Testament to the minor prophets. It's always there. It's always there. And furthermore, as I responded to him on the chat, Jesus himself is coming to rule from Jerusalem. So it seems that God is the architect of bringing the people of Israel back to the land. That might, I mean, I dare say it, he might be a Zionist.
Oh my. Oh my. Yeah. Well, that whole area behind you, Jay, it's one day going to be the largest mountain in the world. It's going to be above all hills, and it's going to be the place where Jesus will rule and reign from Mount Zion. By the way,
that.
yeah, yes, he surely can. It's interesting, and I was gonna bring it up during the thing, but can you imagine if, I mean, it fell really close. One of the missiles from Iran actually fell pretty close to that area. Could you imagine it? I remember in the 90s, it happened with Saddam Hussein. In the early 2000s, it happened with the war with Iraq. That it nearly hit one of those Muslim structures, including they were concerned about the Dome of the Rock at one point being hit by an Iraqi missile. Could you imagine if it actually happened within our lifetime that an Iranian missile hit one of those things? It would be an outrage. They'd probably blame the Jews for that. They'd probably say it was a Jewish conspiracy, a white flag,
there is
something like that.
no way that any Arab nation would ever be blamed for a missile that fell on the dome. It would automatically become the some Rothstein inspired conspiracy did a planned demolition of the dome and then used a firework like a Roman candle to pretend it was a missile. Oh, this is AI.
It'd be like a 9/11 thing. Yeah, it'd be like a 9/11 thing. It'd
be really bad.
But
it would be really bad. There would be no end of the conspiracy.
Yeah. Jay, that we did a study on Jeremiah, I think it was last week, Jeremiah 33, where it talks about the restoring the fortunes of Israel. So there, if somebody wants to watch it, we did said Jacob was out of town, so we did it. And I think in that chapter alone, chapter 33, but even chapter 32, 31, and 30, which is the book of hope that Jeremiah has within the book of Jeremiah, you see how God promises to restore the fortunes of Israel, to restore a blessing to the land, and to bring them back, not just after the exile of Babylon, but to bring them back at the end of the age.
Yes. Available on
So
more
people
of the
could avail
channel.
themselves to that if they wanted to know.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. It is a good study too, really good study. So I do recommend you all watch it if you haven't seen it. Okay, this will be the last question for today. When we get to heaven, will we see everything from beginning to end in truth?
Oh, sorry, I just.
You want to take that one? I mean, I have my answers, but I'm not completely sure it's the way the word, the way the question is stated. I don't know if I would state it like that.
Can you just repeat that question again, please, Davey? 'Cause I didn't
Yeah.
quite.
Okay, this is the way it was entered. When we get to heaven, will we see everything from beginning to end in truth?
I'm not good. Is that? Are we talking there about looking back through history and seeing things from God's perspective? All the events of our lives and seeing them from His perspective. I mean, is that what He means from beginning to end? But He does say that that when we see Him, we shall see Him as He is. And I do believe, actually, we may look back on our lives and see God's hand in that, and see even situations that were confusing to us at the time. I think we'll have a completely different perspective on many of them, and we see them in their fullness. But so I suppose in that sense we will see things clearly that at the moment are obscure to us. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's a reality that I think we have a better understanding of our faith, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these, is love. We will have no need for faith and no need for hope, because we will be with the Lord. We would have His love, of course. And I think that understanding of who He is and what He's done for us for eternity, we will be that greater knowledge than we have today. We'll really understand how much God loves us. We cannot possibly on this side of eternity understand that. Up to a point, yes. I can teach about it. I can give it to you academically. I can think about it emotionally. But the understanding and knowledge that we're going to have at that point, it's going to
yeah,
be real to anything we can ever imagine. And then we could understand why our lives happened the way it happened, why God orchestrated our lives, and it was His love carrying us through.
yes,
And we would be there because He loves us so much, and He died for us, and we would understand that, and He rose again for to give us eternal life. We would have a greater knowledge of that, and so everything will make sense. That's my understanding. Everything will make sense. Why things happen the way they did,
yes.
and it was always the God who loves us and cares for us and died for us, that brought us to that point in eternity.
Yes, remember that Paul said that at the moment we know in part and we prophesy in
Yes,
part, but then we
correct.
shall, fully know, and
Yeah,
so He knows us. So
yeah. It'll be a greater knowledge. I mean, I'm not sure if we'll know everything. We're not going to be omniscient in that sense, but we'll have an eternity to learn from our Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'm kind of I might just jump in a little too. Yeah. I would agree with you there too. I do wonder if there are going to be some things that we won't remember anymore. It's kind of like there'll be some things that
Yeah,
you'll wipe
yeah,
from our memories that we won't know.
yeah. We certainly won't remember unbelievers. we certainly won't remember even our family that didn't come to the Lord. It'll be obliterated from our mind.
Yep. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for answering the questions. Also, thank you all for being with us today. I just pray you all have a great week ahead in the Lord. And Elon, would you like to close us out today with a word of encouragement, please?
Yes. When I look for words of encouragement for myself, I always think of what keeps me, what keeps me really going is thinking about where we are where we are heading in a sense. I mean, one thing that has really taken hold of me more and more over the last year or so is looking, because often when I first got saved, you think of, when you die, you go to heaven. Of course, that's a partial truth, but we were meant to inhabit this physical earth, and what's really gripped me over the last year or so is really how God is going to restore all things, and all the sadness and sin and mess that we've made of this earth. God's going to fix all that, and we will dwell on this earth in all the glory that God intended for it, in His presence. And the thought of that is, and being part of the heavenly, the Jerusalem that comes down from heaven, and the thought of being constantly in God's presence and being, and it's going to be, it excites me so much, and I find it very, very encouraging, that we're not going to be sat on a cloud with a harp, but we'll be working and with the Lord, and our whole lives will be, centered around Him in a way that the moment is impossible because of the ravages of the curse and of sin and of our own failings. So that's what keeps me going, and I find very encouraging. So I hope that it encourages others as well.
Thank you, Elon. God bless you guys. Keep preaching Jesus. He's coming soon. We'll see you guys next week.
Amen.
Please pray for Jacob as he continues his South African tour, and for Pierre as well. So God bless you guys. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Elon. Thank you, Davey. And we'll see you guys next week.